I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd fall for a cowboy. Growing up in Seattle, my idea of rugged was someone who hiked the Cascades on weekends, not someone who spent their days mending fences and breaking horses. But then again, I never thought I'd spend a summer in Montana either, and look where that got me. My name's Marcus, and 3 years ago I was 26, freshly unemployed after my startup folded, and desperately in need of a reset button on my life. My college roommate Jake had moved back to his family's ranch outside of Livingston after graduation, and when he heard about my situation, he didn't hesitate. "Come out here," he said over the phone. "We could use an extra pair of hands, and you could use some space to figure things out. No pressure, no rent, just work and wide open sky." I arrived in late May, when the mountains were still capped with snow, but the valleys had turned impossibly green. Jake picked me up from the tiny airport in Bozeman, and as we drove south with the windows down, I felt something in my chest start to unknot for the first time in months. The air smelled different out here, clean and sharp, like possibility itself. The ranch was bigger than I'd imagined. Several hundred acres of rolling grassland backed up against the foothills. Jake's parents, Tom and Linda, welcomed me like family, showing me to a small cabin near the main house that would be mine for the summer. Jake's cousin Rhett is staying in the bunkhouse, Linda mentioned as she helped me unpack. He's Tom's nephew, came out from Wyoming to help with the season. Good kid, keeps to himself mostly. I met Rhett that first evening at dinner. He walked in late, hat in hand, apologizing for losing track of time while checking the irrigation system in the north pasture. When he looked up and our eyes met, I felt something I wasn't expecting, a jolt of recognition that made no sense because I'd never seen this man before in my life. He was probably 30, maybe 31, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of creek water, that peculiar gray-green that changes depending on the light. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar, and when he shook my hand, his grip was firm and calloused. "Nice to meet you, Marcus," he said, his voice low and measured. "Jake's told us a lot about you." "All lies, I'm sure," I replied, trying to sound casual despite the fact that my heart was doing something complicated in my chest. He smiled then, just barely, one corner of his mouth lifting. "We'll see about that." Over the next few weeks, I fell into the rhythm of ranch life. I learned to mend fences, move irrigation pipes, and tell the difference between a cow that's just being stubborn and one that's actually sick. Jake was patient with my city boy incompetence, and Tom treated my mistakes with dry humor rather than frustration. But it was Rhett I found myself watching. Rhett I found myself thinking about when I lay in my cabin at night, listening to the coyotes sing in the distance. He moved through the world with a quiet competence that fascinated me. He could calm a spooked horse with just his voice, fix a broken tractor with nothing but wire and intuition, read weather in the clouds that I couldn't even see forming. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words carried weight, and he never, ever seemed rattled by anything, except maybe me. I started noticing the way he'd look at me sometimes when he thought I wasn't paying attention, how his jaw would tighten when I'd strip off my shirt in the afternoon heat, the way he'd find reasons to work near wherever I was working, close enough that I could hear him breathing, feel the heat radiating off his skin in the sun. One evening, in mid-June, after everyone else had gone inside, I found him in the barn checking on a mare that was close to foaling. The light was golden and thick with dust, and he was running his hand along the horse's flank, murmuring something I couldn't quite hear. "How's she doing?" I asked from the doorway. He didn't startle, just glanced over his shoulder. "Good. Should be tonight or tomorrow. You here to learn or just watching?" "Can it be both?" That almost smile again. "Come here then." I walked over and he guided my hand to the mare's belly. showing me how to feel for the foal's position. His hand was warm over mine, and I could smell him, leather and sage and something earthier, something that made my mouth go dry. "You ever delivered a foal before?" I asked, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. "Dozens," he said. "It never gets old, though, that moment when they first stand up, all legs and determination." He paused, and I felt his thumb brush against my wrist, so light it might have been an accident. Some things are worth watching over and over. I turned my head to look at him and found him already looking at me. We were close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his eyes, close enough that I could feel the question hanging between us, unanswered and dangerous. "Rhett," I started, but I didn't know how to finish. He stepped back, letting my hand fall. "We should head in," he said. "Early start tomorrow." I lay awake that night, replaying the moment, wondering if I'd imagined the heat in his eyes, the intentional brush of his thumb, wondering what I was doing, falling for a cowboy who probably wasn't even gay, who lived a life I couldn't begin to understand. But I couldn't stop thinking about him. July came in hot and dry, and the work got harder. We were moving cattle to higher pastures, which meant long days in the saddle and nights so exhausted I'd fall asleep before I could even finish dinner. Rhett was teaching me to ride properly, not the tourist trail ride stuff I'd done a few times, but real riding, the kind where you and the horse move like one creature. "You're thinking too much," he told me one afternoon, riding beside me as we herded a group of stragglers back to the main herd. "Your body knows what to do. You just have to trust it." "Easy for you to say," I muttered, adjusting my grip on the reins for the 100th time. "You've been doing this since you could walk. So stop trying to control everything and just feel it." He moved his horse closer to mine, our legs nearly touching. "Here, let me show you something." He reached over and adjusted my posture, his hand firm on my lower back. "Sit deeper in the saddle. Let your hips move with the horse, like dancing." "I'm terrible at dancing too," I said, but I did what he told me, and suddenly I could feel it, the rhythm I'd been fighting against. "There you go," he said softly, and his hand lingered a moment longer than necessary before he pulled away. "See? You just needed to let go." That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat on the porch of my cabin, drinking a beer and staring at the stars. There were so many out here, more than I'd ever seen in my life, a river of light spilling across the darkness. I heard footsteps on the gravel and turned to see Rhett approaching, 2 beers in hand. "Thought you might want another," he said, holding one out. "Thanks." I took it, and he sat down beside me on the steps, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. "Can't sleep?" "Thinking too much," he said, echoing his earlier words. We sat in silence for a while, drinking our beers and listening to the night sounds, the distant lowing of cattle, the rustle of wind through grass, the creek running somewhere in the darkness. "Can I ask you something?" I said finally. "Depends on the question." I took a breath. "That thing you said earlier about letting go. Were we still talking about riding?" He was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said very softly, "No." My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "Rhett, I don't want to misread anything here, but I need to know. Is this just me, or is there something—" "It's not just you," he said, cutting me off. He still wasn't looking at me, his eyes fixed on some point in the darkness. "It hasn't been just you since the day you arrived." "Then why—" "Because I don't do this, Marcus." He finally turned to face me, and in the dim light from the cabin window, I could see the conflict in his eyes. "I don't get close to people. I don't let anyone in. It's safer that way." "Safer for who?" "For everyone." He stood up, setting his half-finished beer on the railing. "I should go." "Rhett, wait." I stood too, catching his arm. "I'm not asking you to marry me. I'm just asking you to stop pretending there's nothing between us." He looked down at where my hand touched his arm, then back up at my face. "You don't know what you're asking. Then tell me." For a long moment we just stood there, the night air thick and electric between us. Then he reached up and cupped my face with his hand, his thumb brushing my cheekbone, and I stopped breathing entirely. "I've never," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I've never let anyone close enough to matter, never shared what's mine, my space, my life, my—" He paused, struggling for words. "I keep people at a distance because it's easier than watching them leave." "Who says I'm leaving? Everyone leaves eventually, that's just how it works." "Not if you give them a reason to stay," I said, covering his hand with mine. He closed his eyes and I watched the war playing out across his face. Fear and want and something deeper, something that looked like loneliness so profound it made my chest ache. Then he opened his eyes and said, "I don't know how to do this." "Neither do I admitted, "but maybe we could figure it out together." He kissed me then, soft and tentative, like he was afraid I might break or disappear. I kissed him back, my hands finding their way to his waist, pulling him closer. He made a sound low in his throat and deepened the kiss, one hand sliding into my hair, the other pressing against my lower back. He tasted like beer and summer and something indefinably him, and I wanted to memorize everything about this moment, the way he felt against me, the way his breath hitched when I bit gently at his lower lip, the way his fingers tightened in my hair. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. He rested his forehead against mine and said, "I've wanted to do that for weeks." "Me too. But Marcus, I need you to understand. I'm not good at this. I'm going to mess it up. I'm going to pull away when I should lean in, and I'm going to—" I kissed him again, shutting him up. "Then we'll figure it out as we go, together." He pulled back enough to look at me, really look at me, and something in his expression softened. "Together," he repeated, like he was testing out the word. After that night, everything changed, and nothing changed. We still worked side by side during the day, still ate dinner with Jake and his parents, still maintained the careful distance of coworkers and casual friends. But at night, after everyone else was asleep, Rhett would come to my cabin and we'd sit on the porch or lie in my narrow bed, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about growing up in Wyoming, about a father who drank too much, and a mother who left when he was 12, about learning to be self-sufficient because there was no one else to rely on, about the first time he realized he was attracted to men, and the shame that came with it in a small town where everyone knew everyone and difference was dangerous. "I never acted on it," he said one night, his head on my chest, my fingers running through his hair. "Not once. I told myself it was easier that way, safer. I'd see guys in town sometimes, tourists or ranch hands passing through, and I'd feel that pull, but I never let myself do anything about it." "Why not?" "Because I was scared," he said simply. "Scared of what people would think, what they'd say. Scared of losing the few connections I had. So I just buried it, told myself it didn't matter." "And now?" He tilted his head to look up at me. "Now I'm still scared, but I'm more scared of letting you go without ever knowing what this could be." I kissed the top of his head. "You're braver than you think." "I don't feel brave. I feel terrified." "Good," I said. "That means it matters." As July turned to August, we fell into a rhythm. Rhett started teaching me to rope, standing behind me with his arms around mine, guiding my movements. "It's all in the wrist," he'd say, his breath warm against my ear, and I'd try to focus on the lesson instead of the way his body felt pressed against mine. We'd ride out to check fence lines in the far pastures, and he'd pack extra sandwiches so we could have lunch by the creek, sitting on the bank with our boots off and our feet in the cold water. He'd tell me stories about the land, about the harsh winters and brief summers, about the wildlife that moved through these valleys, elk and deer and the occasional bear. One afternoon, we were riding back from the north section when we came across a young coyote caught in old barbed wire. It was struggling weakly, exhausted and scared, and I started to ride past, but Rhett dismounted immediately. "What are you doing?" I asked. "It could bite you." "It's suffering," he said simply, approaching the animal slowly, talking to it in that low, calm voice he used with the horses. "Can't just leave it like that." I watched as he carefully freed the coyote from the wire, working patiently despite the animal's attempts to snap at him. When it was finally loose, it limped a few feet away and then turned back to look at us, its yellow eyes wary but somehow grateful. Then it disappeared into the sagebrush. Rhett stood there for a moment, watching where it had gone, and I felt something shift in my chest, a deepening of what I already felt for him. This hard, closed-off man who wouldn't hesitate to help a creature that could hurt him, who led with compassion even when no one was watching. "That was a good thing you did," I said when he remounted. He shrugged. "Wasn't going to let it suffer." "Still, not everyone would have stopped." He looked at me then, something vulnerable in his expression. "I know what it's like to be trapped," he said quietly, "to feel like there's no way out. I wouldn't wish that on anything." That night, lying in bed with the windows open and the night breeze cooling our skin, I said, "I'm falling in love with you." I felt him tense beside me. "Marcus?" "I'm not asking you to say it back," I interrupted. "I just needed you to know. I know this is temporary. I know I have to leave at the end of summer, but right now, in this moment, I'm falling in love with you, and I wanted you to hear it." He was quiet for a long time, his hand finding mine in the darkness, lacing our fingers together. "I don't know if I know how to love someone," he said finally. "I don't know if I'm built that way anymore." "I think you do," I said. "I think you're doing it right now, even if you can't say the words yet." He pulled me closer, burying his face in my neck. "I don't want you to go," he whispered. "When summer ends, I don't want you to go." "Then ask me to stay." "I can't. You have a life back in Seattle, opportunities. I can't ask you to give that up for—" He paused. "For this. For me. What if I want to?" "You say that now, but when winter comes, when it's 20 below and the wind won't stop, and you haven't seen the sun in weeks, you'll regret it. You'll resent me for keeping you here." "You don't know that." "I know that everyone leaves eventually," he said, and there was such pain in his voice that I ached with it. "I know that people promise things they can't keep. I know that hope is dangerous." I didn't argue with him. I just held him tighter and let him believe what he needed to believe, even as I was already making plans in my head, already imagining a future that might be possible if I was brave enough to reach for it. August came in with a heat wave that turned the grass golden and made the work even harder. We were haying, which meant long days on the tractor and nights stacking bales in the barn until my muscles screamed and my hands were raw with blisters. Rhett worked beside me, his shirt soaked with sweat, and I'd catch him looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between hunger and sorrow. One evening, after we'd finished stacking the last of the day's bales, Jake cornered me by the water trough. "So," he said casually, too casually, "you and Rhett." My stomach dropped. "What about us?" He smiled. "Relax, man, I'm not blind. I've seen the way you look at each other, and I've noticed he's been a hell of a lot happier since you got here." "Jake, You don't have to explain anything to me," he said. "I just want you to know that I'm glad. Rhett's had a hard life, harder than most people realize. If you can give him some happiness, even for a little while, that's a good thing." "It's not just for a little while," I said. At least, I don't want it to be. Jake studied me for a moment. You thinking about staying? I'm thinking about a lot of things. Well, for what it's worth, we'd love to have you, and I think Rhett needs you more than he's willing to admit. He clapped me on the shoulder. Just don't break his heart, okay? I don't think it could take it. That night, I found Rhett in the barn, brushing down his horse, a big bay gelding named Copper that he'd raised from a foal. I watched him work for a moment, the gentle, practiced movements, the quiet communion between man and animal. Jake knows, I said finally, Rhett's hand stilled on the brush. Knows what? About us? He figured it out. And he's happy for us. He said you seem happier. Rhett went back to brushing, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. Happiness is temporary. I walked over and took the brush from his hand, setting it aside. Why do you do that? Why do you push away anything good? Because good things don't last, he said, finally looking at me. Because I've learned not to count on anything permanent. I want to be permanent, I said. I want to stay, Rhett. Past summer, past fall, through the winter and into next spring and beyond. I want to build a life here, with you. He shook his head. You don't know what you're saying. Yes, I do. I've been thinking about it for weeks. I can freelance, do web design remotely. I don't need to be in Seattle. I need to be where I'm happy, and I'm happy here. With you. Marcus, I know you're scared, I said, taking his face in my hands. I know you think I'm going to leave, that this is going to end badly, but I'm not them, whoever hurt you before. I'm not your father who stayed but wasn't present, or your mother who left entirely. I'm me, and I'm choosing you, if you'll let me. He closed his eyes, and I saw a tear slip down his cheek. I've never shared my life with anyone, he said, his voice breaking. I don't know how. Then we'll learn together, I said, just like everything else. He opened his eyes and looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the moment he decided to take the leap, to trust in something he'd never trusted before. Okay, he whispered. Okay, stay. I kissed him then, there in the barn with the horses watching and the last light of day filtering through the high windows, and it felt like a promise, like the beginning of something I'd been searching for without knowing it. The rest of August passed in a blur of work and stolen moments, of learning to navigate this new reality we'd created. Rhett slowly started opening up more, letting me into corners of his life he'd kept private. He showed me his favorite spot on the ranch, a high meadow where you could see for miles in every direction. He taught me to read the weather like he did, to smell rain coming on the wind, to know when a storm was building just from the way the cattle behaved. And slowly, carefully, he started using words like we and ours instead of I and mine. One evening in late August, he came to my cabin after dinner and said, "Come with me. I want to show you something." We rode out to the north pasture as the sun was setting, the sky turning shades of orange and pink and purple that seemed impossible. He led me to a spot overlooking a valley, and we dismounted and stood there, watching the light change. "This is where I come when I need to think," he said, "when things get too heavy and I need perspective. I've never brought anyone here before." "Thank you for bringing me now," I said. He turned to face me, and in the dying light, his eyes looked almost silver. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to just listen, okay? Don't say anything until I'm done." I nodded. "I've spent my whole life keeping people at arm's length," he began, "building walls and telling myself it was for the best. And then you showed up with your city boy clumsiness and your questions and your way of looking at things like they're all new and wonderful, and you just walked right through every defense I had. You made me want things I'd convinced myself I didn't need. Connection, partnership, love." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "I'm terrified of this, Marcus. I'm terrified of needing you, of building something with you and then watching it fall apart. But I'm more terrified of pushing you away and spending the rest of my life wondering what could have been. So yes, I want you to stay. I want to share my life with you, my space, my world. I want to teach you everything I know about this land and learn everything you can teach me about your world. I want to fall asleep next to you and wake up with you and figure out how to do this thing that I've never done before. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. This was my grandfather's, he said, holding it out to me. It was a ring, simple silver with a turquoise stone. He gave it to me before he died, told me to give it to someone who mattered, someone who made me want to be brave. Rhett, I breathed, hardly daring to believe what was happening. I'm not asking you to marry me, he said quickly. Not yet, but I'm asking you to stay. I'm asking you to build something with me. I'm asking you to take a chance on a broken cowboy who's never done this before but wants to try. I took the ring and slipped it onto my finger. It fit perfectly. Yes, I said. Yes to all of it. He kissed me as the last of the sun disappeared behind the mountains, and I felt something settle in my chest, something that felt like home. That was 3 years ago. I'm writing this from the cabin that's no longer just mine, but ours, expanded and renovated to hold both our lives. Rhett is outside working with a new colt, his voice drifting through the open window. Tomorrow we're riding up to that meadow again, the one he'd never shared with anyone before me, and we're going to scatter wildflower seeds and talk about the future. It hasn't always been easy. Rhett still struggles sometimes with letting me in, with trusting that I'm not going anywhere. Winter was hard, just like he predicted, but we made it through together, learning to rely on each other in new ways. And spring came, like it always does, bringing new life and new possibilities. Last week he asked me to marry him, properly this time, down on one knee in the barn where we first admitted what we felt. I said yes before he even finished the question. We're planning a small ceremony in the fall, just family and close friends, right here on the ranch. Jake jokes that he's never seen Rhett this happy, this open. Linda says I've been good for him, that I've helped him find a part of himself he'd lost. But the truth is, we've been good for each other. He's taught me about resilience and patience and finding beauty in simplicity. I've taught him about vulnerability and trust and letting people in. He still doesn't share easily. He probably never will, but he shares with me, and that's enough. More than enough. It's everything. Sometimes when we're riding together across the ranch, our horses side by side, he'll reach over and take my hand, and I'll remember that first day when he said he'd never shared a saddle. Now we share everything, our lives, our dreams, our future. And every day, I'm grateful that I took a chance on a summer in Montana, on a closed-off cowboy who needed someone to see past his walls, on the possibility of love in the last place I expected to find it. The ranch stretches out before us, wild and beautiful and home, and I know with absolute certainty that this is where I'm meant to be. Not despite the hard work and the isolation and the challenges, but because of them. Because this life, this place, this man, they've shown me what it means to really live, to really love, to really commit to something bigger than yourself. Rhett catches me watching him and smiles, that rare, genuine smile that still makes my heart skip. "What are you thinking about?" he calls. "Just how lucky I am," I call back. "We both are," he says, and I hear the wonder in his voice, the gratitude that still surprises him. Yeah, I think, watching him work with the colt, patient and gentle and strong. We really are.